Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Here we are once again with a very important topic. It seems like all we do is talk about important issues, and I think that's what we want to do, and we really hope that you can join us today. Today, we have a very important subject, and it is Social Security and Medicare challenges ahead. This is a very important subject. Social Security and Medicare are extremely important programs. I would say they are critical programs. Millions depend on them. Social Security was established in 1935 and Medicare in 1965. Both face concrete financial challenges. Challenges are not, or I should say, changes are not a matter of if, but when, and we need to be informed. In this program, we will present some facts related to these programs, challenges that these programs face, and some proposals that are being considered for filling the funding gaps. There are funding gaps in these programs, and that's why they need changes. So before we continue with this important conversation, I would like to introduce our guests today. We have two of them, and to my left is Marquita White. Marquita, you are a volunteer, and actually you are the chair of the Advocacy Network for AARP Arizona. Is that correct?
That is correct. I have a great time. I have a wonderful group of people that I work with, and we want to make sure that programs like Medicare and Social Security stay in force completely to serve the people who are retired now and the future generations, because we want to think forward.
Of course. And you are retired, if I'm not mistaken. You are by profession a social worker, correct?
Yes, I've been a social worker, and I also worked in government. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, perfect. Well, you continue to be a social worker, advocating and volunteering a lot. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yes. To my right is my colleague, Steve Jennings. Steve Jennings and I have been traveling together. We were in Nogales, Tucson, and Yuma. And Steve, just for information, I just got the numbers for Yuma, 105 attendees, which is very close to the number that we got in Nogales. About 100-plus attendees join us for the presentation that we did, which is basically what we are going to be doing today. So thank you, Steve. I've enjoyed traveling with you and speaking about these issues, and we're so happy that you can join us today.
Yes, and you were a very capable translator there, David. I know, especially there in Yuma, a minority of the audience, I think, was listening in English. We had
That's correct.
Our PowerPoint slides both in English and Spanish, and I think people enjoyed that part a lot.
Yeah, perfect. Well, again, this is a very important subject. It has to do with the future of Medicare, the future of Social Security. Regrettably, politics are always get on the way. Politics get on the way. But with today, AARP is nonpartisan. And Steve, we have some pointers that tells us what is to be nonpartisan and how we can say that AARP is nonpartisan. And I would like to ask you if you can share those points. What does it mean to be nonpartisan?
Well, to be nonpartisan means that we do not push candidates for office.
Right.
We don't push political parties. We don't have a political action committee. AARP does not donate money to candidates or political parties. We don't use a political action committee to do that, a PAC.
A PAC,
and
yes.
We do push issues,
right.
Issues that are important to Americans as they get older. And Social Security and Medicare are two of the main ones.
Yeah.
And we're very active on issues, but not in a Republican way or a Democrat way or a Green way or a libertarian way, we push issues, not politicians and political parties.
Yeah. And Marquita,
That's
I don't know.
nonpartisan.
Right. Thank you. And I don't know if in the community and your circle where you live and move, if you have ever been told that, oh, AARP is this and that.
Oh yeah, that always makes me laugh because I know the people that I volunteer with, and we are from all spectrums of the political world. We have different party affiliations or thoughts, but we do not get involved in any kind of political, advocating for any particular candidate or party.
Point I always like to make is we think aging is an American issue,
Right.
and everybody is aging. It's not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue, and we want all those different extremes to work together to solve some of the problems we face.
Right. And we were talking off the air that we may be the only organization, I almost want to say, in the country that is speaking about these pressing issues, these important issues. A lot of times people don't realize that Social Security and Medicare are experiencing funding gaps, and the need is to fill those gaps. And there are proposals being discussed in Washington, and we will be addressing some of those. So again, this is a very important subject. Sometimes you hear that young people don't want to contribute to Social Security because they say it's not going to be there and that it's going to go bankrupt or this and that. Well, actually, that's not factual. So we're going to talk about those good stuff. Medicare, is such a critical healthcare program, and a lot of times people also get concerned that they may get cuts or in benefits or increase in costs. So this is our very, very important
I was
issue.
of that. This is Steve again. I was of that opinion, I think, when I was in my 20s. I didn't think, for one thing, I'd live to be 65, and here I am 67 all of a sudden. And the other thing was I didn't think Social Security would last that long. Did you have that feeling, Marquita?
No.
You always
Never
believed
think
in it?
that it's going to apply to you. I'm never getting old.
Right.
Yeah, but it's still here.
Here it is. Yeah, here.
It's still
Yeah,
here,
you
and both
bet.
of them are still here. And I honestly believe that this country's smart enough to make sure that these programs continue.
Well, and also the public really supports them.
Definitely.
Social Security and Medicare are a couple of the most popular things the federal government does. So
Right.
there's broad public support for these programs.
Right. So though they face funding gaps, we just have to, and that's why AARP continues to address these matters, because it is better to make changes now than wait for to do it in an emergency state, which that changes would definitely be more drastic. So it's going to be very important that we, the public, kind of push the politicians to take action, because again, this is the right time to do it. If not, then changes could be more drastic in the future.
We can make smart changes now
Definitely.
that will benefit everyone, because the critical feature is this isn't just about protecting older people. This is protecting the interests of younger people who have already started to contribute to the Social Security system and Medicare.
Definitely. Let's get, I would like us to address this matter in three aspects. Let's cover facts about these programs, challenges about these programs, because let's face it, this program, Social Security, it started in 1935. The demographics, the people working, the life expectancy and all that was one that that is very different than today. So even AARP wrote this book called Updating Social Security for the 21st Century. So there's room, I think, for changes that would fill these funding gaps. But again, we have to be informed.
Well, and, the general rule on these big national systems that the industrialized nations have, are that these programs should be solvent for a 75-year horizon. That would pretty much cover the people that are alive now and beginning to contribute if they're old enough to begin working. I know I started contributing to Social Security when I was 16 and got my Social Security number. So when David talks about the funding gaps, what he's talking about is if Social Security were to pay every penny it owes for the foreseeable 75 years, the way it's funded at this point, it won't have 100% of that money unless changes are made. And the changes, the longer you wait, the bigger the changes have to be. So if you deal with them early, you can probably make them in a way that most people don't even notice. And Congress has done that before.
Right.
You know, currently the full retirement age, if you're born after 1960, you have to be 67. And it used to be 65.
Right.
That's one of the changes, Congress made back in the 80s to make, and they applied it to future generations. Almost all the changes that are under discussion would not apply to the current beneficiaries of the program, but people in the future.
And that, you said at one point, a few years ago, it was the full retirement age was 65. They changed it to 67 gradually, right?
That's right.
So whoever was born from this year to this year is 65, and then 65 in 2 months, 65 in 4 months, 66, 66 in 2 months, 66 in 10 months, and so on. So everybody needs to know what their full retirement age is, because it is at that age that you get 100% of the benefit that you are entitled to. Anytime you solicit or claim benefits before that, it'll suffer a reduction. For instance, many people think that it's at 62, and they don't realize that about 25% of those benefits are going to be reduced if you claim at 62. Permanently.
Yeah.
So it is extremely important to understand the concept of full retirement age. We have about a minute. Let's talk about a few other facts about Social Security. What do we know? I mean, how do we become eligible for Social Security?
Well, we work and we have a Social Security number, and we pay Social Security taxes on our wages we earn, called FICA taxes. You'll see them on your paycheck.
Or FICA, sometimes we refer to them.
That's right. And you have to have worked to get Social Security for 10 years, for 40 quarters, and paid FICA taxes to become eligible for Social Security and Medicare.
Right. And that applies, or if a spouse did not accumulate those credits, they would be eligible for spousal benefit. That happens to my mother.
Based on the workers' benefit.
That's correct. Right. So 10 years minimum, and they do not have to be consecutive.
That's right. And in 2018, 1 quarter of coverage to qualify for Social Security means you had to earn and pay Social Security taxes on at least $1,320
per quarter.
Each 3-month period.
Right.
That's right.
We have to go on a short break. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, with an important subject today, and it is Social Security and Medicare challenges ahead. These are very important programs, but we have to make some changes, preferably today, so we don't have to wait for them to be really in such a shape that we have to act in an emergency and make the wrong changes. Everybody needs to be informed, and we need to basically get in touch with our representatives, congressmen, senators, because they need to take action. This is the right time. If not, changes will be drastic in the future. So let's continue with some of the facts, and then we're going to go to the challenges and hopefully just touch on a few of those proposals that are being considered to change this program so that the funding gap is filled. What are other facts that we know about Social Security?
Well, one of the things, David, is that Social Security is actually a lifelong program of protection for people. Of the money Social Security pays out, it only pays out about 66% of its money to retired people. Mm-hmm. It pays out about 15% of its money to people who got hurt or got sick during their working career and were declared disabled. It pays about 7% of its money to widows, where the worker died and they have children. And as you mentioned earlier, spouses, there's a spousal benefit also. So, and you can be born disabled. Some people are, a small number, and so they would be eligible for financial support from Social Security based on their parents' working record. And so it's an important program of lifelong protection.
Right. And one of the things that we need to remember is like a 401k, once it runs out, potentially it will run out. Social Security never runs out. If you have a benefit from Social Security, you'll get it until you pass.
And it has an important aspect of a cost of living adjustment that happens annually each year. And the idea there is that your purchasing power should not decrease over the period that you're on Social Security.
And we got the news today that it's going to be a 2.9%, the COLA, cost of living adjustment. It was announced today.
Biggest one in a while.
Yeah, 2.9%, almost 3% increase to those that are getting Social Security. Now, let's go back kind of quickly because we have to cover a lot of ground. Social Security, why is Social Security experiencing a funding gap? What are some of the factors that led us to that funding gap?
Well, if I can mention one other important aspect of Social Security, David, is that it really keeps about 15 million people out of poverty. And interestingly, it provides more than half of family income for half of the people on Social Security.
Amazing.
Social Security provides more than half their income. And for about a quarter of the people on Social Security, it provides 90% or more of their income.
So basically, that's all they have.
Exactly.
For
all
a
they
quarter
have,
percent, 25% of the population, that's all they have. Social
And for
Security.
half of the people on Social Security, it provides more than half of their income.
Wow.
So this is a very important program.
Definitely.
One of the challenges that's happening is that people are living longer. And when the program started in 1935, in 1940, a 65-year-old could expect to live about 13 more years after turning 65 on average. But by 2030, it's expected to be that people will live about 25 more years after.
Wow.
So, there's people are more people for a longer time are drawing benefits. You mentioned they keep giving you benefits as long as you're alive. That's one of the good things about Social Security.
Marquita, I think you were going to say something.
Oh, I just want to add that it also contributes to the economy.
Right.
Because of people getting their Social Security checks, we get another 1.2 million jobs, and it contributes $1.4 trillion toward our economy.
So we get the money, we spend it.
Yeah,
right?
we are big spenders.
Another challenge, David, is that when the program, during the height of the baby boom, I was born then in 1951. There were about 25 births for every 1,000 people each year.
So 25 births for every 1,000. So lots of people contributing.
Yeah, and currently it's under 13 births.
Wow.
For every 1,000 people. So there's fewer people being born to get jobs to pay into the Social Security system.
So this
while they're
explains
working.
why the funding gap, right? There's just a lot of people.
One of the challenges.
Right. A lot of babies being born in those years. Now, less babies, less people in the workforce. So obviously, they're contributing less money into the. In
fact, in 1955. There was about 8 workers for each person on Social Security.
8 workers per beneficiary.
Yes, and by 2033, it's expected there'll be 2.1 workers for every beneficiary, 2 people working for each person drawing Social Security.
So I suppose this could be considered the arguments of why the Social Security is in the state or moving into the state. We're experiencing this funding gap because obviously there's less people being born, there's less people working, there's less people contributing. Obviously, at some point, it's going to face some challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make the point that Social Security is not part of the federal budget. It's a separate self-financing system that's separate from the federal government. So it should not be seen as a piggy bank for deficit reduction.
Okay, so that's very important because basically it's not part of the federal budget.
Yes, and about 86% of it is paid for by payroll taxes, people working and paying FICA from their paycheck, and about 12% of it is interest on the Social Security trust funds, and a little bit, a few people have their benefits taxed if they continue to work. That's only about 2% of the funding.
So if we can, so that we can move to the proposals because we still have Medicare to cover. So could we say that Social Security is self-funded?
That's right.
So Social Security is self-funded. And what is the trustee report reviews in terms of when will the Social Security have enough or will not have enough funding to cover 100%
well,
of
and
benefits.
at this point, it's 2034.
By 2034.
If you make no changes in the system, it will only be able to pay about 75% of what it owes. That is, if there's no changes. Now, that's only that's 16 years from
Right.
now. That's getting pretty close.
So again, it is self-funded. It's not going broke.
Because fewer workers, people are living longer.
Right.
That's right.
And by 2034, if no changes are made, it is still not going to go broke, but it will only be able to pay 75% of
Right.
benefits.
From the workers working at that time, paying in, it should be able to pay 75% of benefits. AARP doesn't think that's good enough. It
Right.
thinks it should have to pay every penny, 100% of benefits that it owes.
And that's why it's so critical that we stay informed and then keep pressing the politicians to
And
pay
make
attention.
it an issue on how we vote.
Say that again?
Well, make it an issue when we vote that
Right.
we ask politicians what they're going to do to protect and make Social Security secure, like Marquita said, for us, for our children, and for our grandchildren.
Right. Let us go now to the proposals because, again, there is a funding gap, potential funding gap by 2034 with Social Security. And I know, I mean, AARP published a booklet that had something like 15 proposals. And Steve, I know time is short, but please let us tell us what AARP did. We went to this what is it called, think tanks?
That's right.
And what did we request of them?
Well, we asked them for their reactions on the proposals you're talking about are the things that are under discussion in Washington among the Congress people. And so we asked a conservative think tank and a more progressive think tank what they thought of each of these proposals. And we went around the country and we gave people clickers and they could vote after they heard the pros and the cons from each of these. And you know what? People don't agree with each other on what should be done.
Right. Now, let's kind of at least mention the proposals. We might not have, actually, we will not have time to go into them a little deeper. But in this presentation that we normally do, you have the pros and cons of each of the proposals. But the first one that we have, at least on our materials, is to raise the full retirement age from 67 to 68. Or perhaps even to 70, and that if we raised it from to 68, that fills 16% of the funding gap. If we raise it to 70, then that would be 38%. Obviously, this is a tough one because there's a lot of people who work. I mean, you were telling me, Marquita, that a brother of yours worked in physical labor, and that would be a killer if this was to be implemented, right?
Yes, he had to take early retirement at 62, and so because of that, he reduced his income going forward forever.
Right.
And that one kind of makes sense because, people are living longer, so they're going to draw benefits longer, so why not make them wait a little longer? That's the pro argument for it. And the argument against it is that actually not everybody is living longer. The people that are living longer tend to be the people that have good jobs and medical coverage and get paid more money. Their life expectancies are getting longer, but low-paid and minority workers, people that do physical labor, are not so much. So would it be fair? Probably not to some people.
Right. Now, another proposal is to increase the payroll tax cap. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, Steve, it's $128,000. The first $128,000 gets or under gets Social Security tax. In other words, people pay on the first 128, but after that amount, they stop paying. So another proposal is to raise it.
Yes, that's right. And at the current level, about 83% of all the wages paid in the United States are taxed for Social Security. Somebody like Bill Gates that makes millions of dollars every year, he might only pay FICA on 1% of his income with this, $128,000 cap. And there's a proposal to raise that to 90%, which is what Social Security did another time in the past, which currently would be about $250,000, something like that.
And the interesting thing is that if they raise it to about $247,000, that would fill 26% of the funding gap.
That's right.
So again, these are proposals and calculations that, if implemented, they would fill a percentage of the funding gap. So again, one was to raise the full retirement age to 68 or perhaps 70. Another one is to basically raise the limit. It's called the Payroll Tax Cap. Now, there's also a proposal, Steve, to eliminate altogether.
To completely eliminate it, which
Right.
would, you tax every penny that's earned in wages. See, Social Security only taxes wages. It doesn't tax dividends and other ways people can make money. If you did that, it would fill about 70% of the wage
That
gap.
is amazing. If we eliminate the payroll tax cap, then 70% of the funding gap is filled.
But remember, David, that the amount you get back in Social Security is based on how much you pay in. If you eliminate the tax cap, some people might get millionaires might get $150,000 in payments every year.
So not all the money that they pay into
Is
will
that
stay
really
in
the
there. They
intention
still, right.
of Social Security. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's take our second break, and we will have concluded the portion of Social Security. We cover a few facts. We cover the challenges and why, there's funding gaps. People are living longer. There's less workers working per beneficiary, et cetera. And we basically just mentioned at least several of the proposals, which are the bigger ones, the ones that fill the larger funding gap. Stay with us. We'll be right back and cover Medicare. I know we're going fast, but we have some resources for you so you can follow up after the show and in the days to come. Stay with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. I'm your host, David Parra. I had not said that before, but I think you know me. And hopefully, I'm going to ask a favor of whoever's listening. Help us or follow us on Facebook. The AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection is a Facebook page that you can follow. And if you think we're going too fast, and I know we are, we tend to do some postings and videos and maybe offer resources on our page so that you can kind of follow up on these important matters on your own time. Let's now move to Medicare. Again, the subject today is Social Security and Medicare challenges ahead. We're literally, I guess, sounding out on a warning at least that it's coming. As I said earlier, changes are not a matter of if, but when. These programs will have to change. And I think it is in our best interest that we all become familiar with how they operate, how they work, what are some facts, what are some challenges, and then the proposals. So let's talk about Medicare. What do we know? What can we say in terms of facts about this program called Medicare?
Well, Medicare has 4 parts, and I guess, Marquita, you're on 2 of those parts, right? Part A and Part C.
Yeah, Part A and Part B.
And I'm still working, and I'm on Part A myself. My employer requires me to sign up.
And
for
I'm
that.
right behind you.
And Part A
Yes.
pays for you in the hospital. Part B pays your doctor. And there's a new part, kind of new, called Part C, which covers prescription drugs.
Right. So
Nope, that's Medicare Advantage.
that would be
C.
Part D.
Part D.
Right.
is
So
Part
let's
D is
kind of
right.
repeat. So it has Part A hospitals, Part B doctors, Part D drugs, prescribed, of course. And Medicare is a little interesting because you have 2 options. You can either take the original Medicare, which you basically have your A and B, you buy the D, and then you could buy supplemental insurance. That would be original Medicare. Or some people go to the Medicare Advantage, which basically they purchase their coverage, Medicare coverage through an insurance company, and they get the prescription drugs included.
If it has that coverage, yes.
That's
most
correct.
of them have
And most
that,
of them
and some
do,
of them
yeah.
have some other extra coverages like gym membership
Right.
or maybe a little bit of vision care. And so those are choices you have to make. And every year at the end of the year, there's David, a couple month period where you can switch between
Actually, we are
plans.
getting to the open enrollment period, which is October 15 to December 7.
Yes, I'm getting
October-
all kinds of mail about
Yes,
that.
it is during this time that people get bombarded with a lot of publicity, trying to get you to change your plans to a different company, etc. But just be careful. Most of it you probably will dispose of, you'll shred, or but there's still pay attention to the mail if it's coming from the company, from the plan that you have, because most of the notices are sent by mail, but from the company that you have. That you have to pay attention.
Now, an important aspect of Medicare, David, is that Medicare is not like Social Security in the sense that Social Security is a self-financed program. Medicare is not. It takes money. It needs money from the budget of the federal government every year to run. In fact, it needs 42% of its money from the federal government. It gets about 37% of its money from payroll taxes, about 13% from premiums. But we need to have Congress keep funding Medicare so it can pay 100% of what it owes.
Let's stress that. Let's highlight this important, because this, I think, is one of the most important facts that we will present on this show regarding Medicare. Whereas Social Security, we talked, is self-funded, not so with Medicare. Just listen to this again, and let me round off the numbers. You could say that 60% of the cost of Medicare is paid by the beneficiaries, and the government has to literally pay.
That's right. About 58% is covered.
Yeah.
And then the government has to contribute 42%.
Right. So, and they get that money from the general fund.
Right. It competes with everything else for funding.
So this program is more in a bad shape, in a worse shape than Social Security. Social Security is still okay. We're just saying changes need to be made because in 2034, it will not be able to pay full benefits. Whereas Medicare, changes are like now. Could we say that, Steve?
Well, yes, but it's actually for the next, I think it's about 8 years. It's 2026. If you don't make any changes in the program between now and then, it will not be able to pay 100% of what it owes.
And that's the part A,
and
if
so
I
you
understand
have,
it right.
Yes, and so you have 8 years. But, like I say, the longer you wait, the bigger the changes have to be.
And that's on the one hand, but on the other, from the perspective that it is the government who's still funding 42% of the cost of Medicare, that to me is like a red flag and something that needs to be addressed.
Well, yeah, and the another interesting thing about it is about half the people on Medicare are spending at least 17% of their income on health care. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're spending major portions of their income just to cover medical expenses, even though Medicare does not cover, the premiums and the co-payments you have to pay, dental, hearing, and vision care, or if you have to live in a nursing home. None of those are covered by Medicare.
Right. So now let me ask the question that I did with Social Security. What created these challenges? Why is it that inflation or the cost of healthcare, I suppose that's one of the challenges, right? The cost of healthcare. Why are we in this situation that the federal government has to pay 40+% of the cost of Medicare?
Well, one of the reasons is because, you got this big bulge in the population called the baby boom, which, Marquita and I are both members of. And, in 2000, there were 40 million people on Medicare nationwide, 40 million in 2000. In 2030, that's expected to double to about 80 million. So in a period of 30 years, you're doubling the number of people on the program, running up the bills that Medicare has to pay.
In addition, the inflation rate on health care is much larger than the overall inflation rate.
So inflation is growing at a higher pace than the general inflation, and I should say the inflation on health care, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So the inflation on health care is rising faster at a higher rate than the general
regular inflation.
That is
That's
amazing.
Right. And so, like you had in 2012, for example, Medicare paid about $470 billion in bills. In 2021, it's expected that'll almost double to $818 million. That's how fast this thing is
So
going
basically,
up.
I see two factors here that created these challenges. And one is that the baby boomer generation is retiring, right? They're not contributing, and they're on. I think they are retiring at a pace of 10,000 a day, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
10,000 baby boomers a day are retiring. So that basically means that they're going to enroll in Medicare, and they're obviously going to incur a lot of costs to the program, and that's why this, I guess, the funding gap. Here we go again.
And again, you get this thing where, like in 1975, you had 4.1 workers for each person on Medicare. And in 2030, that's expected to be about half that, 2.2 workers for each person on Medicare. So again, you have fewer people working and paying into the system.
And let's repeat that number again, Steve, of the number of people on Medicare expected to double. So in 2000, we had 40 million on Medicare. By 2030, it'll grow to 40 million?
To 80 million. It's going to go from 40 million to 80 million in 2030.
So that's only 10 years. In 10 years.
Oh, no, that's 30 years.
Oh, 30 years, sorry.
Yeah. But
from 30
still,
years. Yeah.
Still, that's a huge increase.
Of course.
The number of things double.
And if you don't mind repeating the amount of money that was spent in 2012 and the projected amount by 2021 of the spending the spending projected amount.
2012 it was 471 billion.
Billion with the B.
Yeah, billion, and just 9 years later, it's expected to be 818 billion. Marquita was talking about the medical inflation. That's an example of it.
And the drugs, the cost of drugs.
We cannot
and the more
neglect
people on the program.
Yes.
More people and
let's talk about the
drugs.
prescription drugs, because I think this is very, very important. And this campaign, because this is actually, I have not said this before, but this is actually part of a campaign that AARP is running. It's called Be the Difference, Vote. But let's address in maybe 2 minutes the issue of prescription drugs. So, and I think the most important, Steve, on this matter is the negotiating power that Medicare does not have, right? The negotiating ability to basically negotiate prices that other programs such as Medicaid has.
That's right. And, they call these things rebates, that the drug companies, you pay them the cost and then they rebate some of the money back to you. And, Congress passed a law some time ago that said that Medicare cannot negotiate the prices of the drugs, while Medicaid, the program for the low income and disabled that don't qualify for Medicare, most of them, can, and they get the drugs much cheaper, as do the large insurance plans.
So insurance companies, Medicaid, they're able to negotiate because they have such large pools of
millions
users.
Of people.
So they're able to go to the insurance, to the pharmaceuticals and say, look, we want you to give us a good price, and they get good discount.
Or we'll go to your competitor.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're saying that Medicare is not allowed to do that?
No, it's not allowed to do that. And that's one of the ways you could drive off that date where it can't pay all that it owes in 8 years.
That is a huge point.
If you could pay less for drugs, that date moves off into the future, past 2026.
Wow. So that is an important
point. That's one of the main changes.
In the United States, we pay some of the highest rates for medications for drugs in the entire world.
Right.
And it's really hurting us in a multitude of ways.
One of the things that I was very, very impressed in doing the presentations along with Steve in Nogales, Tucson, and in Yuma, and actually I've been kind of educating on this for many years, is that when you deal with the numbers, with the hard data, the emotion gets out and the politics also gets out, because a lot of times politics influence how people think and feel. These are very concrete numbers that once you see them, you realize, wait a minute, this is really, I cannot afford to be political about this. These are real concrete challenges that these programs face, and we have to be informed and pay attention to them. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think just my little plug for AARP, I really appreciate the fact that AARP has stepped forward and been the good citizen to bring the information. We don't contribute to PACs and other influences on the political process. We bring information. And
this to me, what we're doing today basically is a display of the fact that we are nonpartisan. we're basically addressing issues that are important to our members and to the community at large. We will be going on our last break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the proposals that are being considered for changing Medicare to fill those funding gaps. And again, the super important show. Stay with us. We'll be right back. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We are addressing Social Security and Medicare challenges ahead. We are now on the subject of Medicare. Let's go into the subject and more specifically the proposals. So what are some of the proposals being considered to quote unquote fix Medicare?
Well, one of the first ones, David, is raise the eligibility age. You know, we already talked about how if you're born after 1960, you're going to have to be 67 to be fully insured for Social Security and get your full benefit. Yet Medicare stays at 65. So if the program's facing financial difficulties, one way to do it would be to make people wait longer. That's one of the proposals under discussion. And again, we're talking about future people, not people on the program now or about to get on the program. This is not about that. This is about people in the future have to be 67. That would align it with Social Security. And people are living longer. So it kind of makes sense in that sense.
Now, so that would mean that people would have to somehow make sure they have health coverage between, or all the way up to 67. If not, there's not going to be options for them, right? Even those, one proposal said that they can still, no, that would be the second, the premium support. So let me just summarize this point. So one option or proposal is to raise the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 67 to align it with Social Security, correct?
Yeah, and one of the problems with that is, what are people going to do between 65 and 67 for health insurance? You're likely to need health insurance more at that stage of life.
Right.
And so what do? You stay on work longer so your employer can cover it, and that would, drive up the cost for employers. It's relatively expensive for employers to insure, and that would be private employers and government. Costs would go up if you do that. So that's one disadvantage of that program. Also, some people can't continue to work. I used to work with motel maids who lift heavy, when I was young, and I worked in a motel, and a lot of those older women, were not able to continue to work. So what are they going to do between 65 and 67, So that's maybe, the disadvantages of that, that easy approach to changing it. Also, that's only predicted to save 5% of the funding gap if you do that.
A big change, but with very little savings.
Yeah, and I think at that point in an individual's life, it is when insurance rates go up markedly. And so that's where Medicare provides such a great support and service to
if you try and buy insurance on the open market at that age, it's going to be a lot of money. Prohibitively expensive for most.
So that would be a difficult one. So here's another one that I think is very important to mention it before we end our show. And this is the so-called premium support plan. What is that, Steve? The premium support plan.
This is kind of the favorite of the current Speaker of the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan from Minnesota, and he's talked about this. And it's that, in essence, premium support is talking about Medicare helping you pay the premium to buy private health insurance instead of Medicare. And actually, his plan would leave Medicare, traditional Medicare, as one of the options that you would have. But the general idea is Medicare gives you a check rather than providing your medical
They have
insurance.
called that a voucher program kind
well,
of
the
thing.
opponents call it a
Oh,
voucher.
the opponent.
And the proponents call it premium
support.
Yeah.
So basically, it would give the beneficiary an amount every month, I suppose, or a year, and the beneficiary would have to go and buy his or her own coverage.
Yeah, and the proponents say that puts Medicare on a budget. See, one of the problems with Medicare is you don't know how many people are going to get sick. You don't know how much their bills will be. So you never know how much it will cost. Social Security, you know that. You know how many people there are that are going to get checks, what you owe them. So it would put Medicare on a budget, which is good for the federal budget. Because remember, we have to get money out of the federal budget. It gives seniors, the proponents say, more choice and control because they can choose among competing plans. And modest or low-income people would get a larger check because they could not, come up with money out of their pocket as easily as other people. That's the proponents.
Now, this is a very ambitious, very, ambitious is the word I want to use, because that point of putting Medicare on a budget that the government could literally know where the program is going in terms of the funding, that's a very positive one. The negative is that if you just give money or an amount to, say, a Medicare beneficiary, and then if the inflation, the cost of that coverage goes up and they don't increase that amount in equal rates, then they're going to be in trouble because they might not have enough money to buy the coverage. So I suppose that would be a con, Steve?
Yeah, that's right. You're talking about the main argument against it is
Right.
Would these checks that the government gives you keep up with the increasing cost of health insurance? It may force seniors to pay more out of their pockets who don't necessarily even have that money to pay more out of their pockets. So that's the main argument against it. That Medicare now will pay when you get sick what it's going to pay as long as you're sick, and you're not having to shop around and figure out what plan is best for you. And that's the arguments against that one.
So two very, I have to say, bold proposals. One is let's just raise the age from Medicare eligibility from 65 to 67. That will match Social Security. We're living longer. What's wrong with that, right? Some would say. Then this one would be the one that says, you know what, let's just turn Medicare into a premium support program, or as the opponents of this approach would say, a voucher program, where they would basically give you an amount that would put Medicare more on a more predictable system that government has more control as to how much money is spent, just like in Social Security. Social Security, they know what how much people get, and it's easier to do the projections. With Medicare, it's very difficult, so that would be a argument for it, correct?
Yeah, and somewhat that's happening already with these Medicare Advantage plans. You were mentioning earlier, about a third of the people, I believe, in Arizona are currently on Medicare Advantage rather than traditional Medicare, which means they're, buying coverage from a private insurance company.
Right. Let's cover at least one more. We also cover that in parts of these proposals, it would be critical that an AARP has advocated for at least 2 points that related to prescription drug, which is to give Medicare negotiating authority so that Medicare can negotiate prices on prescription drugs. And again, like Steve said, that Medicaid has an insurance. And how about, I think importation of drugs from other countries, at least in the past, was another kind of concept that was being discussed.
If it can be done safely.
If it can be done safely.
That's been discussed also in Washington,
Right.
and rejected so far.
Right. But I believe that this matter of the given Medicare negotiating ability or authority is a huge one, because then Medicare could negotiate prices just like Medicaid. And I believe that the beneficiaries of Medicare would reap the benefits that right now, I mean, even with the donut hole, right? That's why the donut hole was placed in Part D, because of the rising costs, and it gives discounts to the beneficiaries. Which by the way, donut hole is expected to close in 2020 originally, but now they moved it 1 year. Is that? Do you know if that's
so.
final?
I believe so.
I think they moved it 1 year. How about at least one more a proposal that they're dealing with? How about the tax? Because something that we did not say with Social Security is that we pay 6.2% for every dollar that we make. And one thing would be to increase that, which not a lot of people talk about. But in Medicare, we only pay, or I should say we pay 1.45%. 1.45% goes to Medicare, and another
of the FICA that we pay out of our paycheck.
Right. After, So
of that 7.6%, 1.45 goes to Medicare. And there's one proposal is to raise, and your employer matches that.
That's correct.
So that in actuality, it's 2.9% goes into the Medicare trust fund of every dollar you earn. And so the proposal is to raise that about 0.5% from 1.45 to 1.95%. So with the employer match, they both would be about 3.9, and that'd be a big increase, and quite a bit more money would flow into Medicare to help it pay its bills.
Right.
And the pro argument, the main one, is that improves the financial security of Medicare because Medicare has more money to pay its bills. And the folks that are against that say higher taxes always hurt the economy. And, if the economy runs well and it provides more money to employers who then hire more people or pay higher wages, and, more of that's paid into the Medicare trust fund. So there's pros and cons on that one. But, of course, nobody likes seeing their taxes raised.
Yeah. Before we close, Marquita, I would like to ask you, you've been part of the Advocacy Network, and I'm sure you are also part of this campaign. Just very briefly, what is this campaign about, this Be the Difference vote?
Well, this is our world to make, and it's very important that we vote, because when we select people who reflect our values and will create an environment so that we can all have the kind of world we want, then we're all better off. I guess that's my own little Pollyanna.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So, the older voters decide elections, right? In the 2016 presidential election, 90% of people 50 and over that were registered voted. And those tend to drop off in non-presidential elections. Only in 2014 was 75% of the 50-year-olds and older. But they're the biggest voting bloc.
So, Steve, if people want more information about all this, do we have a place that we can send them a website?
Pound Be the Difference.
Perfect. That would be the hashtag Pound Be the Difference. Also, if you go to AARP
Advocates.
AARP.org/vote. That would be another place. And then if you want to join the
Twitter,
the Twitter would be AARP Advocates.
That's right.
AARP Advocates in Twitter. Then you have your AARP.org/vote. We really hope you enjoy this show. We went super fast. It's not easy it's only an hour. But I am happy. I think we at least painted a picture of how these important programs need some changes, and we need to be involved. We really hope you enjoy the show as we did, and hope you can join us next week. This was AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection.